Let's now talk to Meredith Ward. She is a lead job coach for Auticon Australia in Aotearoa. The company prides itself on becoming a working destination for neurodivergent talent. Meredith is the mother of an autistic son and has been a fierce advocate for neurodiverse people for many decades. It's lovely to have her on our program. Meredith, thank you so much for your time. How are you?
Thank you, Kent. I'm really well. Thank you. Great. It's great to be here, and really pleased that we can have a chat about my favourite topic, which is autism.
And you were recently in Auckland. We
I
only just missed you.
Yeah, I was, and it was great to be there, face to face with everybody in Auckland. It was the week before last, and I arrived and it was raining, and I thought, oh, gee, I could have stayed in Melbourne for rain, but that cleared up, and the beautiful sunny skies for the time that I was there, and had lots of opportunity to walk around Auckland and meet some locals.
Well, I'm sure you're well aware that in New Zealand here it is Autism Month in April. What will that mean?
April's a really important month internationally for the autism community. It means an opportunity where we can focus on raising awareness, increase our understanding, and also our acceptance of people with autism in the community.
What would be the number one misconception about people who have autism?
That is a really great question. The number one misconception, I think, well, there's a few, but the number one would be that they don't require support. Autism's largely invisible, and they may not realise that they're actually working with or talking with or interacting with somebody who's on the autism spectrum. And they may take for granted and sometimes misjudge people, I think.
So I know we've mentioned this before on our program a few months ago about if you're an employer or prospective employer wanting to know as much about a person as possible, but also having to factor in on the other side, the person may not be totally willing to talk about every little detail of his or her life. So how do we kind of navigate that that potentially grey area where we can also help and enable and assist, but also protect someone's privacy if and when it's required?
Look, I think the most important thing is respect, just being respectful of other people. But disclosure is a big topic, and a lot of people are very, very reluctant to disclose that they have autism because they've encountered discrimination in the past, or there's a fear of discrimination. And I think for employers, and therefore when somebody goes into a job interview, they're very reluctant to disclose that they're a person on the spectrum. And an prospective employer may notice that, eye contact is different, or the way that somebody communicates is different, and they may not automatically link that to autism because they may have, their journey around understanding and acceptance of autism may be at the beginning of the journey. It is a long journey, lifelong journey. And so I think for employers or prospective employers to keep an open mind about the person that is in front of them, but also not to rely wholly on just a resume or wholly on how somebody might speak and respond to you. Because what we do know from our wonderful autistic self-advocates is that the spectrum is very broad and it's not a linear spectrum, but also to change our expectations around things like social communication, around what we expect people to do and how to be in interviews and other interactions.
So when you are helping people look for work, because I know this is one of your passion projects and this is the thing that you do, is that you help people look for work, do you encourage them to be as open and as honest about themselves as possible? Or is there a case where you have to allow them to be comfortable with disclosure?
So at Auticon, we are a social enterprise and we only employ autistic people. So all of our IT professionals are on the autism spectrum. So they've disclosed to us up front, and that's where we're a little bit different. So we're not helping people generally find work. So we are a consulting organisation. We're an IT consulting business. And we're not a recruiting company as such, and we don't help in the general sense of people getting a job. What we do is provide opportunities for autistic people to work in IT, and then we're having the conversation with prospective businesses who would like to begin or continue their journey for neurodiversity in their workplaces.
In your past work as an advocate, did you encounter that topic often about helping someone and being encouraging, but also having to be understanding?
Yes, I've worked, prior to joining Auticon, I worked in the NDIS space. So, and I understand New Zealand's kind of looking at a similar type of support structure. So I worked with in that more of a general space and trying to help people find a job. And it was during the pandemic, so it was very, very difficult. And talking to prospective employers about, a person with autism or a person with a disability has skills. There's an opportunity here to fill the labour shortage and the skill shortage that exists, because people with disability and autism are actually able to fill roles that they have available. But what we want from employers is to consider what we call job carving or not specialization, but job carving, so that they might have a role, and instead of looking for somebody to fill the whole role, they can look at, these are the skill sets of the person in front of me, and these are the skill sets required for 90% or 50% of the role. Let's have a look at filling that role by a person with a disability who has the skill sets to complete that portion of the role.
Yeah, because that's the key part, isn't it? Is the skill set. So
Yep.
I can imagine, regrettably, that some managers or prospective employers might rule somebody out because of the fact that they have autism, as opposed to seeing what their strengths might be that maybe other people in their environment don't actually have.
Yeah, correct. So it is, and at Auticon, where we look at a skills strengths, whereas we have a skills strengths focus, and it's also about it. For instance, my son Grant, who's 27, he's unemployed. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. So we see jobs that are advertised that might be in his area of interest, which is animals. And, they want a license, they want somebody who's, can do, a whole range of things, meet and greet people, act as a reception, kind of roles, as well as perhaps the animal care and so forth. So he has the skill sets. He's got a Cert 3, for instance, in animal care. So, for instance, we'd be really keen for a prospective employer, and he applied for a job yesterday, so let's hope he gets an interview. But we would love employers to say, okay, Grant has these skill sets. Sure, he can't drive a car, but he can do the rest of the job. He can care for the animals. He's passionate about animals. So that's really what we want to do on a very much broader sense. In the community, and for Auticon, it's around people with IT, but obviously autistic people and people with disabilities have skill sets and passions in lots of employment areas. It's not just IT. We recognise that at Auticon, that it's not just IT. We happen to be about IT, and we are looking to expand beyond our 4 pillars of cybersecurity, QA testing, software development, and data analytics. So they're the 4 streams that we look at, but we are looking to expand beyond those.
So tell us about Grant's dream job.
His dream job would be to be able to care for animals. He's a very gentle person. He's very quiet. He will engage with you if you talk to him about his area of interest, which is animals. He watched lots of documentaries about animals. His dream job would be able to, feed, support, improve the quality of life for cats or some or other animals. He doesn't like jumpy animals. So because he's a very quiet natured man himself, animals that are not so jumpy and speedy around the place. We've done some fostering of guinea pigs, for instance, for the RSPCA over here, and they can be quite fast moving. So that's not an area of strength for him, but yeah, that would be his dream job, is to be working with animals and caring for them and making sure they have the best possible quality of life.
So you have an intimate knowledge of autism because you've been living this now for 27 years with your son. Can you tell us about his story and about your story?
Yeah, so I think, and I guess one of the things I wanted people to know is that understanding and learning about autism is a lifelong journey. When Grant was diagnosed at the age of 2, which is pretty early, I didn't know anything about autism apart from the term. I'd heard the term, didn't know anything about it, and Grant had an obvious presentation of autism, so he would run on his toes. He didn't develop any usable language till he was about 5 or so. So he didn't babble the same way that other babies babble. He didn't do the key signs of development at the same milestone. So he didn't point at things and, speak or try to engage with us. He used to run around the borders of playgrounds. He'd also become quite distressed and bang his head. And be distressed for long periods of time, not just a little what we would call tantrum. It was way beyond that. And so when he was diagnosed at the age of 2, suddenly I thought, wow, this. I can't even begin to describe I guess, the emotional impact, but it was also began a huge learning journey for me. And what I decided to do was to learn as much as possible around autism, and that for me was the way that I had to get out and do something and learn about it. And what I have learned also is to change my expectations and to increase them, and also to sometimes be more accepting, because Grant has his own set of strengths, and I have to be aware of those and help support him in a way that he can demonstrate those to the community as well. But there are some sensory challenges as well, because autism, it's really complex. But so, for instance, loud noises hurt his ears, and crying babies in particular. So, he knows babies cry, and so that seeing babies around him can actually induce a bit of anxiety, because he knows that babies cry, and it hurts his ears. So he's learnt strategies now at the age of 27. He can remove himself from those things. But his journey, he went through mainstream preschool and education settings. He's which the we chose that for him because we wanted to give him an opportunity to learn from his peers, which he has. But it's also, I guess, been an opportunity for his peers to learn about difference and to be accepting of difference. And I think that's a really important thing that, excuse me, we all need to be accepting of difference and more understanding, and not necessarily judge people by what we see initially,
What are your best hopes for Grant?
Look, my hopes for Grant, he has his own. My hopes is that he fulfills his own, I guess, desires for life, and those are, and goals, his personal goals. So his personal goals are to get a job, to live independently, not live with mum or dad. And he would love to find a partner and be married one day. All of those, the same similar aspirations to most people. So I really hope that he's able to achieve those goals, and we'll support him and engage with professionals who can help him support those, achieve those goals.
Did you watch the TV series Love on the Spectrum?
I love it.
How?
It's one of my favorite shows. And when I'm talking
Yeah,
to, corporates and you doing training, because at Auticon we do lots of training, there's free training, that we offer around understanding autism. It's awareness. It's a very, high level thing. But I love it. I often refer to Love on the Spectrum, and it's just wonderful to see young autistic people have an opportunity to
yeah,
find a partner. One of the things I think people don't understand is they think, oh, autism, that means that a person doesn't look at you, or they don't have good social skills, or they don't care about you. And that's not true. And in fact, that reminds me of the day that we saw the pediatrician, and Grant was 2. And, she said to me, Meredith, what's your greatest fears? And I said that, that there's something really wrong. I didn't even know what I meant by that, but of course I meant disability. And she said to us, well, I think Grant's autistic, and I didn't know what that meant. And I went home and I opened up a child development book, and it said, autistic people, don't feel emotion, and you mean as much to them as a broom or a chair. And I was horrified, and it was all wrong, really wrong. So yes, autistic people have empathy and they care about others. Grant cares about me and his dad. And recently, his Grant's grandmother passed away at the ripe old age of 98. And his dad was kind of working furiously just prior to the funeral. And he, I was kind of reminding his dad, it's time to go. We need to go. And Grant said, it's okay, Mum, Dad's going through some stuff.
oh, right.
So, and I think that's probably one of the things that people underestimate about autistic people. They think they can't feel an emotion and don't care. And that's totally wrong. They do, but they feel it and express it
Yeah,
in a different way to maybe you might expect. And this is kind of where I come back to where I began a long time ago about talking to you about we need to change our expectations, because
sure.
just because it's different doesn't mean it doesn't exist or it's wrong.
As far as placing people with autism into gainful employment, how do we go here in New Zealand if we were going to compare to, say, Australia?
Look, I think the rates are similar. I think the difference with New Zealand, and I discovered this by speaking to some wonderful advocates in Auckland the week before last. In New Zealand, you don't actually know the stats of autistic people and unemployment. You do know the stats of employment rates for people with disability generally. So the employment rates in New Zealand is 20% of people with disability are employed, compared to 70% of the community who don't have disabilities are employed. So they're a long way behind. And in Australia, the participation rates of autistic people is 40%, compared to more generally people with disability is 53%, and the participation rate of people without disability is 83%. So generally, if I can just focus on the Australian stats around autism, because we have those and you can extrapolate them for New
Yeah,
Zealand, they would be similar. So a person with autism is 3 times more likely to be unemployed than a person with a different disability, and they're 6 times more likely to be unemployed than somebody without disability. So they're a long way behind the stakes, and so much more needs to be done to, I guess, provide information to employers and to reduce the fear, or to overcome, or at least have a conversation. What are the challenges for you as an employment or opportunity to employ somebody with a disability or to employ an autistic person? Because we know in particular autistic people have significant strengths in their areas of interest. They might have, I tell you what, if you want to know something about, it might be a transport system, ask somebody, an autistic person whose passion is transport, and you will know everything that there is to know from that person, because the knowledge is very deep. It
Yeah.
might be narrow, but it's very deep. So I think employers across the board need to be more open to having conversations around, how can I take this job that I have a vacancy? How can I match the skill sets of somebody in front of me who might be a person with disability or an autistic person or somebody who's neurodivergent, and give them an opportunity to have a go? What are the supports? So they could reach out to somebody like us if they were interested in exploring autism in the IT space, but also organisations in New Zealand of, how do I get the support? How do I get the knowledge and the support that I need? And one of the ways of is also asking the person, well, how can we support you to do this role? What do you need to do this role? Like, they're just ask the question and engage the person with a disability or the autistic person, and be respectful. There needs to be more about two-way communication, as well. Often we're talking to corporates about, providing information about how to support autistic people. And one of the things I say, well, as a team, in your team or your squad, why don't you all talk about, and share what works for you, and for everybody to answer a simple question like, I work best when. So, for instance, I work best when I can, I'm working with people who know that I think aloud, and so I have to talk through what a challenge is. Or it might be, I work best when I can wear noise cancelling headphones, or I work best when there's structure and routine. So there's simple things that everybody can do that helps that two-way sharing. Like, let's all share about the best way that we work. But the thing is that when we're looking at, and here I'm getting into the topic of adjustments in the workplace, here the difference is, a person without disability, adjustments are around preference, whereas adjustments for a person with a disability or autism is around need. And what I mean by that is, for instance, a person without disability, for instance, might need an adjustment in that, a workplace adjustment in that they'd like more flexible working hours because they've got to drop kids off at school, for instance. So that's a preference, compared to an autistic a person who might need more flexible work hours because it's quite stressful to be in an office environment. And so working from home and providing a hybrid model is a way that you can support somebody in the workplace. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in New Zealand and Australia and around the world, in fact, and Autism Awareness Month is a really great opportunity to engage with organisations around how you can do that, how you can reduce the unemployment rate of people with disability and people with autism, because they want to work. Their desire is to participate in employment, which means they're therefore earning income. And not only do you get somebody to fulfill a role, but they feel great about themselves. They're working, they're part of society, they're doing stuff that other people are doing, which is what they want to do. They just want to be included and accepted for who they are, not because they're, outside the box of everyone's expectations.
Thank you so much for coming on today, Meredith, and telling us about Grant and yourself and the last few years and all of the work that you've been doing, of course, and giving us a lot to think about. We do appreciate your time on Take It From Us.
Thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate the interest in autism